not allowed to see birthday parties, graduation. Somebody more mature will see her through her maturation. So be glad for the laughter in your living room.
When I was about 7 years old, we had a family picture made. My mom, my dad, my younger sister, and I. And I would look at this picture over the years, and I would always think about that Sesame Street song that said, one of these things doesn't belong here, one of these things isn't the same. And I was always that one thing. My sister looked just like my mom, and even though I had dark hair like my dad, I never really thought that I looked like him. I sort of remained satisfied growing up with whatever answer my mom gave me. As I had my own children, I just kind of brushed it aside, and young mom, you just don't have time to think about things like that. Seeing my oldest son grow more and more to look like me, it caused conversations to happen between my husband and I. We even talked about the possibility of me being adopted, but I threw that idea out because I had heard stories about my mom's pregnancy with me, and I've seen pictures, and so it never occurred to me that I belonged to anybody other than my mom and dad. My dad has Parkinson's and diabetes and other health issues, major health issues. And so every time I would see my dad, I could tell he was a little worse than he was the last time. And so I knew how to Google medical issues, and I knew that things that he had could be genetic, but I never wanted to really find out. I asked my mom how Dad's health was and what his medical future looked like, and if anything that he had was genetic. I thought it was an innocent question, and she said, well, Stephanie, I never actually told you all of the details about your conception. Your dad may not be your biological father. When she told me, my nose suddenly made sense. That picture, that family picture of us, where I felt like I was the odd man out, it made sense. And I knew as soon as she said it that it was true.
I'm not allowed to fall in love.
The practice of sperm donor conception has been going on for more than 200 years. In that time, hundreds of thousands of donor-conceived people have been born all around the world. But only now are the ethics and effects of donor conception receiving scrutiny. Often, the questions are being raised by children who know they were donor conceived, children who are now grown up and speaking up, demanding to know more about their origins. What do donor-conceived people think about their conception stories, the money aspect of buying and selling sperm, and now eggs, in order to conceive them? And how have the anonymity and secrecy involved in donor conception affected them? Are these kids really all right?
I tried to give away my baby.
It's difficult to know just how prevalent the practice is, but estimates are that 30,000 to 60,000 children are conceived by sperm donation each year in the United States. And this is now a global enterprise. Sperm and eggs are sold and shipped internationally, and there is almost no tracking or monitoring of donors or of the children conceived this way. Still, it's easy to think of sperm donation as nothing more than a way to help couples with infertility have a baby.
I have one child who's now in his 20s who was conceived through fertility treatment, and I found it a really lonely and isolating experience. I was still struggling a bit with my own infertility. I wanted to try to provide information and support to other people that hadn't been there for me. It was just so frustrating that in a city of 3 million people and making lots of phone calls and being referred in circles and being part of the women's movement, that I couldn't find the help and support that I needed to make what I felt were informed choices. And I was reading everything I could get my hands on, which wasn't much in those days. It was a lot of conflicting information. I didn't know what to do. At times it felt like the doctor who was treating me didn't know what to do.
Researchers are beginning to conduct studies on the topic of donor conception. We spoke with Elizabeth Marquardt of the Institute for American Values about a study she co-authored, My Daddy's Name is Donor.
My colleagues and I wanted to do a study of young people conceived through sperm donation and just ask them a lot of questions that we were curious about and that seemed to be, for the most part, not being asked of them. It's a challenge, as any researcher will tell you, to study these people or to find them. Our study is pretty unique at the moment in being representative of a large sample in the U.S. and also having these comparison groups of people who were adopted and who were raised by their biological parents. It appears to be on the increase, the use of this technology, but there's still not that many donor-conceived persons in the U.S. and around the world. It's not like they're all living in San Francisco or something like that. So finding them in a way that is not just pulling from, a message board where they're already congregating, but trying to find them in a at least somewhat more representative way can be a challenge. And one of the big things that you're struggling with, too, is that if you're trying to contact and interview the persons themselves, they only know to respond if they know that they are donor conceived. And one of the biggest issues around this has been the secrecy. About 2/3 of the young people in our study did not support anonymous sperm donation. They felt loss around his absence in their lives. They were curious about the rest of his family, which is also their family, grandparents and others. And of course, they were quite eager and desperate to know who else they might be related to in the world, how many half-siblings they might have. I think for those of us who were not conceived this way, it is hard to wrap your head around the idea of first learning that you may have dozens or hundreds of unknown half-siblings anywhere. I, like a lot of people, had never thought about the fact that the babies grow up and that they become people like everyone else.
But many donor-conceived children are never told their conception story, and are therefore not able to be a part of the growing conversation about the practice, ethics, and impact of donor conception. Many of those who do know speak of genealogical bewilderment, attempting to describe the feelings that come from having little or no information about their donor parent. They have a deep longing to know where they come from, who they look like, who they belong to, a longing to know the missing other half of them. When it comes to infertility, family building, and reproductive technologies, the focus is often on those wanting to have a child, rather than on the child they want to have. Reproductive technology has advanced without enough serious reflection on the health and well-being of the children created. These children wonder if anyone considered them, their needs, their desires.
One young man talked very poignantly about feeling that he needed to pay an existential debt. He had a sense that he was in the world because of this practice, and in some way, in order to earn his place in the world, he was considering donating his own sperm.
Barry is a donor-conceived man who spent years looking for his biological father. As a writer and a filmmaker, he has even made 2 documentaries on his own quest to find his biological father and half-siblings.
That idea of existential debt, the idea that you can't question aspects of gamete donation and assisted reproduction because you were produced that way. That's the way that you were given life. So how can you question it? If they hadn't done that, you wouldn't be here. Well, that's not logical, because if that were true, then anyone who is the product of a rape would have to endorse rape. It's quite possible to be grateful for your life and question aspects of your conception.
What is it like to grow up not knowing who your biological father or mother is, or if you have any half-siblings? What is it like to find out that the man you thought was your dad is not your biological father? That your biological father donated his sperm and is known only by a number? How does it impact your self-perception, the choices you make, and your view of life and the world?
There's a lot of current Hollywood movies out right now about sperm donation. It's an exotic new topic that people are exploring in films. And unfortunately, I think that a lot of them are humiliating and degrading, and they're all focused on the mother's perspective. None of them really do the hard work of digging deep, trying to find the truth for the children. And it's very disappointing.
The conversation around donor conception is growing. Many donor-conceived people maintain their own active social network communities through blogs and Facebook groups. Studies such as My Daddy's Name is Donor and work being done in conjunction with Wendy Kramer's Donor Sibling Registry are gathering and examining the experiences of large groups of donor-conceived people. We wanted to hear directly from them, so we interviewed 3 donor-conceived people, asking them to tell us their stories. Alana is a donor-conceived woman who runs the website anonymousus.org, which is a safety zone for real and honest opinions about reproductive technologies and family fragmentation.
I found out from my mother that I was conceived via an anonymous sperm donor when I was 5 years old, and it was just a normal day. We were getting ready for school. She told me, and it was obviously very stressful for her. I remember her face expression and how hesitant she was when she told me. But at that moment in time, it didn't really mean much. So my mom's first husband was infertile. They adopted my older sister. She's 5 years older than me, and she's adopted from Korea. And so just because of our obvious race differences, it begged to be explained. But then my parents divorced when I was 7. A year later, my mom remarried her new husband. My stepdad and my mom had their own child naturally. So I got to see the difference in the dynamics between my adopted sister, who's completely not biologically related to anyone, me, who's half biologically related just to my mom, and then my little brother, who is full biologically related to both of his parents. And that was extremely informative as to how I view parenting and family.
Stephanie grew up sensing she was different from the other members of her family, but she trusted her parents and accepted their explanation that she was fully their biological daughter.
My parents are just really sweet people, do not have a reputation for lying at all, from hiding things. I found out about my conception 2 years ago. The first nights, I was able to cope. I was fine the next morning until my mom and aunt left. And as soon as they left, I think shock set in. I made a phone call to a friend who is an OBGYN. She was able to tell me what kind of doctor my mom would have gone to. I started working online, looking. I don't think I did it very long because just the shock of it just really set in that afternoon. I just didn't know how to deal with it. You're never prepared for a huge shock, and just the weight of it was starting to settle in.
I discovered I was produced from what was called then artificial insemination by donor. I discovered that after my father died when our mother told us. And many years later, we realized we weren't alone, that there were others. And we also discovered that there were ways we might find out more about the truth. So my sister and I set out on a quest to see if we could find anything more about the man who made us and the 500 or 1,000 half-siblings that I have. We succeeded, after many years, in identifying both the sperm donor and also have found 12 half-siblings. The man who did the deed was the husband of the woman who was the doctor whose practice it was. And these were pioneers. She was one of 2 doctors then in the United Kingdom who were doing this during the Second World War. And this guy, his name is B.P. Wiesner, my bio dad, he donated or provided and profited from sperm from at least the early 40s up until probably the late 60s.
My relationship with my mom has always been really great. I felt very loved by her. She really wanted to be a mom. Once I started to look more into the family structure problems, that's when I got a little mad at her. And we had a brief period where my activism upset her. We didn't really speak because we didn't have the words to speak to each other in a dignified way. She supports my activism now, and I think she understands what the problems are. She's willing to recognize my loss, which is big. Until I was 20 years old, the only thing I knew about my biological father was that he was blonde with blue eyes and he had a college degree. So My whole childhood was filled with creating a story around those three facts. And why would someone donate their sperm? It's not donating. Why would somebody sell their sperm? He must have been really poor. So maybe he was a musician, or maybe he was an artist. And my mom, we embraced that theory. I was always more interested in music and arts because I thought that that's who I was. But when I was 20 years old, I registered with Donor Sibling Registry. I found out that he was a doctor. He's of Polish descent. He's 5'9". He's raised Catholic. He used to be a scuba instructor. His donor number is 81. And that's basically all I know about him.
I found out about my conception at the age of 32. It was really difficult to go that long not knowing the truth. But I'm really glad that I didn't know as a child, because I think that I would have been probably much more difficult than I needed to be. I'm a very people-pleasing person. I was the child that fell in line when my parents said, do this, I did that. But I have a feeling, just knowing me and my nature, that I probably would have been a lot harder on my dad than I needed to be. I probably would have tried to buck him whenever I could. And that would have been telling my dad that he wasn't my dad, he wasn't the boss of me, he wasn't my real father. That would have just cut him to shreds.
I was middle-aged when I found out the truth of who it was. I was only 18 when I found out I was conceived this way. The world suddenly became very silent. Our mother was very nervous when she was telling us, and I felt worried about her. We were all grieving the loss of my father in an accident a few months before. Yeah, it was a shock. But, when you're 18, you also think, oh, this is something special about me, and you kind of look for things that are special about you. So I had a sort of secret. And I also felt that, I knew enough to know that there was a lot of changes coming, that reproductive and genetic medicine was charging for it. Even in 1970, it was clear. I'd read Huxley's Brave New World. We all knew that this was coming. So I thought, wow, I'm one of the first produced by science and not sex. There was no sexual act which produced me, except masturbation.
While their stories and family situations may be different, the issues surrounding donor conception in the lives of those created this way are often similar. Many talk about secrets and mystery, about feelings of loss and abandonment, and about wanting to know their biological fathers and that whole side of their family.
Adopted kids do feel abandoned by their birth parents. Donor-conceived children have a little bit different of a story because we're always told how wanted we are. Kids born via sperm donation, they're very wanted by their mothers, which is always a good feeling. But there is that flip side of you were abandoned by someone. Adopted kids are not created on purpose with that separation. Adoption led to sperm and egg donation because adopted kids were being told constantly, biology doesn't matter, it's just how you raised, these are your real parents, the persons who raised you. And that rhetoric led to a new belief system that said, well, then it's okay to create kids biologically separated from their natural parents on purpose. We had one set of language meant to protect adopted children and adoptive parents, but now that's led to manufacturing of kids with separation.
People in the fertility industry, they like to sort of pretend that at one hand, it's incredibly important. They'll say you pick the donor very carefully, and then when they come back for a second child, would you like a child from the same donor so that your siblings will be full siblings, because the blood bond is so important. And the next month they say, forget about it. It's just like a blood donation. It doesn't mean anything. How many people, if they're told that they're sitting in an office across from somebody or a factory floor for the last 10 years, who they've known for years, is actually their brother, would say, oh yeah, so what? For most people, it's meaningful information. And pretend it isn't, goes against human culture, goes against human nature. Sometimes it's argued that adoptees have more need to know their parents than we do because they are abandoned or given away or placed, whatever phrase you want to use, and so there's a trauma there. That equally argues the other way. They might equally want to be less motivated to find out who they were because of that fact. But what unites the children of assisted conception and gamete donation and adoptees is a certain genealogical bewilderment, a certain curiosity. And I would say that, I'll state it this way, that nobody has the right to withhold significant personal information about a person from that person.
After I helped to start this group, and particularly after I met Bill Cordray and Shirley Pratt and realized what donor conception actually meant in people's lives, that was the beginning for me of starting to think, there's more to this. And it's not just about getting babies. And if we're going to have these technologies, then they need to work first and foremost for the people that they directly affect. And although that can seem like it's the patients, in reality, it's really the children who are being born.
Donor conception impacts not only the donor-conceived person, but his or her entire family.
And it explained things about my father. It made things make sense about my father. A sense that he didn't really feel like my father, in himself. That my sense of that, and my mother later confirmed that. And there was this big secret in the family, and I think that hurt us. I think that's one of the main bad things about non-disclosure and anonymity, is the secret that lies in the heart of a family. Secrets are like landmines, they can go off at any time. But until they go off, you're sort of treading around them.
I got to see the differences between how men treat children that are biologically theirs or are biologically not theirs. And I got to see my mom treat a child that was biologically hers and biologically not hers. All children created with the best of intentions or adopted with the best of intentions. When the divorce happened, my mom's first husband, he wanted to keep full custody of my sister, but he didn't want to keep custody of me. It was that symmetry in parenting where he felt purpose in raising her. He felt like her father. And with me, my biological relatedness to my mother just emphasized what I didn't have in common with him.
We spent a lot of time debating on telling my family. I wanted them to know. I told the world through my blog. It felt very good to get the secret exposed to the light. But I didn't want to dishonor my parents by telling them something that my parents obviously didn't want anyone else to know. And so I kept that secret for quite a while. And recently, we began telling my family. And they were all very accepting. My sister just found out recently, and I think she was very shocked, very surprised. She didn't want me to be upset with her for being my dad's biological daughter. And I could understand where she was coming from, but I had to let her know it wasn't even about her. She's not in the picture when it comes to my emotions, my feelings. I love her. She told me the night that we told her that I'm still her sister. I'm not her half-sister. I'm her real sister and whole sister. And so I wasn't sure how she would take it, but she took it with a lot of grace and dignity. I have not told my children yet about my conception. They're too young to really have the full story. I do plan on telling them when it's time for them to know. I think that my parents have handled me being public with my conception very well. I was very hesitant at first to do it because I was really torn between my love and respect for them and not wanting to hurt them and my need to get out there and know. I don't mean it to reflect badly on my mother. I love my mother. I don't want her to look bad or to feel bad. I think she was very brave to bless me by saying, yes, go do this.
Donor-conceived people scour the internet and school yearbooks, cold call fertility doctors and clinics, and register on websites like Donor Sibling Registry, looking for any information or details on their beginnings, their family tree, and their genetic and medical history. Kathleen LaBounty wrote personal letters to 600 former students of Baylor College of Medicine, where her biological father attended. Lindsay Greenewalt asks on her blog, "Are you Zytex donor 2035?" Thanks to advances brought about by the Human Genome Project, many use DNA testing as part of the search for their unknown parent.
I am looking for my dad from day 2. I've been searching for my father, And it's a very emotionally draining thing to do. I kind of do it in spurts. I can go a couple of weeks and spend every spare moment online. And then I have to go a month or two and just not think about it. There are so many dead ends, and it's like just hitting your head on a wall over and over again, trying to find what you're looking for. I want to find my biological father because he is an important part of my life. I wouldn't be here without him. I want to look in his face, or at least look at a picture of him, and I know that I'm going to see myself. I look in the mirror and I don't know who I look like. I don't know who I came from. I know that he is Jewish, and so there's a whole family history there that is probably painful and beautiful all at the same time, and it's my family. I want to know that story. I want my children to know where they came from. I have done 2 DNA tests. I've done one with my mother, which will be helpful in the future if I find somebody who could be a possible sibling. And if I don't find him, it won't be because I didn't look for him.
I've thought about what it'd be like to meet my biological father, and I know that a lot of people have a burning desire to meet their donor father. I wanted to use my time wisely. I didn't want to waste 10 years searching for a man just to have him never manifest. So I'm registered with the Donor Sibling Registry, and I'm doing my activism, and I'm telling my story, but I've let go of the idea that I will find him.
In fact, my search, the reason I would never have gotten anywhere with the search was because DNA testing didn't really exist. The internet has made a lot of difference. It allows virtual communities to develop and communication to be very quick and research to be very thorough. Like I was able to look at my bio-dad's voyages across the Atlantic, looking at shipping records. It was quite a detective search. And the funny thing about his anonymity is that it's such a weak protection. As DNA gets better and better, some child is going to go to school and come back with a little swab kit, and they'll have little home DNA tests in the better high schools. You know, it's going to be a little difficult for those parents who've chosen to lie.
Other issues go beyond the practical matters of genetics and medical history into deeper issues of trust and personal identity.
I don't think that a government or a clinic or a doctor has a right to withhold significant information from a person about that person. It seems to me the stuff of the KGB or a totalitarian state. In the United Kingdom, adoptees have an absolute right to know when they reach adulthood, to see their original birth certificates. I don't think that the state should intrude on family life and instruct parents what they have to tell their children. I would say to parents that if you decide never to disclose to your child, you could conceivably be contributing to your child's ill health and death because you don't have accurate medical information.
Medical history is something really important for a lot of people to know, but it's not the only issue. There are things much deeper than just medicine and health that affect who you are as a person who doesn't know where half of their family is, where they came from, who they are. It's the identity.
It's little wonder that donor-conceived people are speaking up more and more. But when they do, they are often met with insults and hatred.
I had done an experiment telling my friends when I was 13 and in junior high. I told one person and she told the entire school, and then I became known as the test tube girl, which was humiliating for a 13-year-old. And I've done experiments where I tell people that my biological father's dead, which is much easier actually because it shuts people up, but they console you. They understand that you're sad about it, but that doesn't feel good to lie about that either. So whenever I try to tell the truth to people, it still makes them uncomfortable.
We were able to really spark a debate in the public media, which I was very happy about. And there was a lot of mixed reactions. I mean, one of the things that continually surprises me is the level of anger that can be directed at donor-conceived persons when they try to tell their stories. I mean, and if you doubt me, the next time you see a newspaper article about a donor-conceived person has said they feel they have the right to know who their father is, or they've launched a court case, or they've written an op-ed about their experience, look in the 200 comments that follow, and you will see so much anger. People will say, without this, you wouldn't exist. Don't make your parents feel bad. You're spoiled. How can you complain about this? The rest of us in society appear to be able to share, if we have them, our stories of loss or confusion or suffering about the families that we grew up in and how we came into the world. But these people somehow are supposed to just be grateful to exist.
When I first started to do activism against donor conception, I thought that it would be so easy to arrive, state the obvious that children need their fathers, and everyone would be like, oh my God, thank you for reminding us. We'll stop all that business. But there is a huge monster of money and people desperate for children who don't want me to make it harder for them to buy and sell children. And it's a $3.3 billion industry, so I have people's livelihoods that I'm threatening when I try to regulate the industry. You have gay rights activists that love sperm and egg donation and surrogacy because it's basically the cleanest method for them to have children. And you have older couples with money, and the fact that they're willing to spend $100,000 for a kid is money talks, and I can't compete with that as well as I thought I could. When I first started talking about this, people were immediately pigeonholing me as a Christian conservative crazy girl who just can't stop complaining, and I'm such a brat, and just get over it, and just go to the beach and get a puppy and learn how to have fun and just get over it. What does it matter? You know, like, I was a women's studies major from San Francisco. I went to art school. I'm not a Christian conservative bigot, but it was really shocking. The method of my conception is humiliating and dehumanizing enough in itself, and people are extremely vicious, and they use intimidation tactics to try and shut you up and get you to go home. One commenter, not on my blog, but on a colleague's blog of mine, they said to her, "You stupid brat, too bad you weren't the load that your dad flushed down the toilet," which is pretty mean. Nobody likes to hear that.
We're touching on really deep stuff here. I mean, persons who have struggled with infertility, there's a real body of pain there around infertility, and of course we want to be compassionate when people have struggled with that. This seems to be what our culture does when it doesn't know how to handle a new question. You know, and when people are uncomfortable, they just want to shut it down. But there's only going to be, as one of the donor-conceived adults that I know has said, you know, if people don't want to confront this issue around them, their own children are going to be confronting them with these questions sooner or later. One of the things that strikes me so much is that it seems to be about age 3 when children say, "Who was my daddy?"
I was invited to a workshop by a fertility industry professional. When I had my speech, I tried my best to be empathetic, and I said, you know, I understand what you're going through. My mom was infertile, and I'm really sympathetic with her plight. But, and at that point, it became really defensive. And when people start yelling at each other, nobody listens anymore.
I found, just reading through articles and other means online, that there really is a growing community of people who are making their voices heard, and they're angry about what's been done to them, and they want to stop it for future generations.
Olivia Pratton, a donor-conceived young woman in Canada, has sued to change Canadian law so that it would require donor records to be kept and made available to donor-conceived persons. So far, she is winning, but the case continues to work its way through the Canadian court system.
And she needs you, and she lost.
What are we left to do in light of these stories and these facts? What questions are we left with? Can we draw any conclusions? What should we take into consideration as we move forward? There are a number of policy implications that donor-conceived people tend to agree on.
2/3 of young people who are conceived through sperm donation believe they have the right to know who their fathers are. I think it's pretty clear that persons conceived this way, the people who are most directly impacted by this practice, the majority of them do not believe that we should have anonymous sperm and egg donation. And there are a number of nations that are leading the way: Britain, parts of Australia, New Zealand, Norway, Sweden, and now, most recently in British Columbia in Canada, the anonymous donation of sperm and eggs is no longer allowed. I hope that the U.S. can follow that. I mean, the U.S. is really the Wild West of the reproductive technology world.
I am a huge fan of Sweden's policy on sperm and egg donation. There's a central place that all kids can go to find out who their biological father or mother is. The records will not be destroyed. You have to be married and in a stable relationship. You have to have a letter of consent from the infertile spouse. There's a maximum number of donations that can be made in Sweden, which is 6. Unintended incest is a real problem, and when you have a sperm donor he has 100 kids out there in some geographical area and they don't know who each other are, it's a big problem.
The important thing is to have a central registry somewhere where you can find, who has done what. It would seem to me to be pretty damn obvious that you need that. The United States has nothing like that. It's completely cowboy country. Person could have thousands of children. There's a kind of a yuck factor there. It's a little hard to express why there's a yuck factor about it. Then there's the question of accidental incest, as my biodad called it in a letter to his star donor.
The trade in sperm and eggs happens across borders. People go to other countries to get fertility treatments where it might be cheaper or where they can get access to procedures there that they can't get access to at home. You can order sperm from Denmark that's shipped to you frozen in the US and your doctor can inseminate you with it. Well, now if you find out that you're donor conceived, your sperm donor might be a man in Denmark, or your surrogate mother might be a woman in India, or your egg donor might be a woman in Russia. Also meaning you could have half-siblings anywhere in the world. Try to think for a moment what it would be like if you were not conceived this way or if you were not adopted, to grapple with the fact of not even knowing whether your own father is alive or dead. I mean, this is the kind of uncertainty that these people are wrestling with. Some would say, well, even if one country bans it, people can still go elsewhere. But I do believe that our laws and our policies set important norms. There's also international law support for this. The UN Convention on the Rights of the Child say that children from birth have the right to an identity and a name and to know and be cared for by their parents. This was ratified in 1989 by all nations in the world except for the US, unfortunately, and Somalia. We have learned, I think, the hard way often enough that just separating those bonds, that undoing the human family, that trying to kind of just say that kinship doesn't matter, leads to a lot of pain. I don't want to be draconian or sound draconian about it, and I am sympathetic to the desire to have children, but I do wonder if just openness alone, just getting rid of anonymity and saying let's just be open about it and talk about it and let people know how they were conceived, and maybe even bring the sperm donor in as a known donor, or let's call him uncle, and or the child can have a picture of him. I'm not sure that that's enough either. I think it still requires a lot on the part of the child.
Others worry about the commodification of baby making and an industry that sees babies as products to be designed, bought, and sold.
There's definitely an element of baby buying, baby selling to this whole process. Adoption built a framework that said it's okay to separate kids from their biological parents. Then we went to a manufacturing process where it's okay to do this on purpose. And now we have price tags on people in a very literal way. And you have different price tags for different people depending on how much you value those certain characteristics. Blonde, blue-eyed, college degree, athletic. If you have sex and you become pregnant, you have a right to raise your child. You don't have a right to someone else's child, and you don't have a right to purchase people.
I believe it's offensive that money is involved at all. I believe we're talking about the commodification of life here, and I have seen the effects on young people who realize that they are the result of a commodification.
On my website, anonymousus.org, it was very upsetting. One of the stories that was submitted was an anonymous story by a mother or potential mother. She used an anonymous sperm donor to get pregnant, then decided maybe this isn't a great idea, so she aborted the kid. She still really wants a kid, so she admitted, she's like, but I think I might go back to the sperm bank and do it again. And it's extremely upsetting that people view children as like a commodity to be bought and had.
I would really like to see it be abolished altogether. There's just something about knowing where you came from.
The American Society of Reproductive Medicine has endorsed directed, known donation. But if donors and parents do not agree, biological origins remain secret, and donor-conceived persons may never be told of their conception story.
They really want to keep egg and sperm donors anonymous because it threatens their relationship Why did my mom use an anonymous sperm donor instead of having a one-night stand with a willing friend? Because that was a threat to her relationship. Why did her first husband agree to use an anonymous sperm donor? Because he knew that if he didn't agree to it, she would divorce him and have a kid with someone else.
It's very important to tell your child the truth, as some folks say, to tell them early and often. But I also am concerned sometimes that openness itself is not enough. I think sometimes we think that, well, if we set up a family in a certain way, as long as we're open and honest about it, then that'll take care of any pain. And I think we should also ask ourselves seriously, should we be conceiving children in the first place who will be deliberately denied the ability to know and be known by their father?
This is a story that my brother tells to explain perhaps a little bit about the need for biological connection. A couple is pregnant, and they go to a foreign country, and the baby starts to come a little early. So they go to this hospital. They're not familiar with it. They go to the hospital, and everything goes well. She has the baby. The baby's taken away, and they're lying there. They're feeling relaxed. And the nurse comes in, and they said, "Well, we'd like to see our baby now." And the nurse says, "Okay, we'll bring you a baby." And the mother and father say, well, of course, we'd like to see our baby. And they say, "Oh, well, we don't do that in this hospital. We just all put them in one room and then but don't worry, everybody who comes here is very healthy, very intelligent. We'll bring you a baby, just a random baby, but it'll be perfectly healthy and it'll love you and you'll love it and everything will be fine. What could be wrong with that?" And of course, there is something wrong with that. Well, if it's so important in that situation, why is it so hard to understand that it might be a little bit important to us to know who our biological parents were and who our biological siblings are?
And I'm alive. Oh, I'm alive. I tried to give away my child up to the skies, into the heavens, into the wild. I hope she wants me back, wants me back. I hope she wants me back. I hope she needs me in her life, in her life, in her life. Oh, mama wants you, baby, need you, baby, wants you, loves you, hugs you, wants you, need you, baby, wants you, mama wants you, baby, need you, baby, wants you, loves you, hugs you, wants you, need you. She wants you, mama wants you, baby, need you,